welcome everybody to a Friday Fireside Chat with my good friend and inspiration, Alberto Savoia. My name's Rita McGrath. You probably knew that already. And Alberto is a serial entrepreneur. He started a bunch of different companies, which I'm going to ask him to talk about. He's the father of a technique called pretotyping, which we're going to learn about as we're here. And one of his original claims to fame was he built the AdWords business at Google. So a very entrepreneurial career. And this book, The Right It, was how we got to know each other. He asked me to take a look at it when it first came out, and I fell in love with it. I just really, really, really like this book. So, and I like the way it's written too, because it's very approachable and, you know, sort of stumbling on the hard truths over a long career of trying things and having a lot of things that didn't work out. And so how do you know when an idea is a good idea, right? How do you figure that out? So that's what we're going to be exploring in the hour or so to come. So Alberto, welcome virtually.
Thank you, Rita. Thank you for having me. And thank you for everybody that has shown up. As you can see, we're both very literal. It's a fireside chat, and we both have fireplaces. Mine is on, even though it's a little warm, but so we're very literal. And as you'll find out, I only speak of things which are true and that we can demonstrate, which really annoys some people, but can be very, very useful because there are a lot of other people that don't do that. So exactly. That's kind of the context. I'm an annoying engineer guy that likes to put things into numbers for your benefit.
I think it's for all of our benefits. So let's start off, just for people that aren't familiar with you. Tell us a little bit about your journey.
Well, I was born in Italy, and like pizza, I came to America where I kind of, for bigger and better things, I was fortunate enough to land at a few companies that became very, very successful. First, Sun Microsystems, then Google, and I was an early employee at both of those companies. So I saw firsthand what happens when you have the right product combined with the right execution. So after Sun Microsystems was a success, I had enough resources to take risk. I did my first startup, VC-backed startup. We raised $3 million, and 18 months later, we received an offer to be acquired for $100 million, which 20 years ago is a pretty good numbers. Now,
that's amazing.
Unless it's a billion, it doesn't count. But in those days, that was 100 million was the goal. So I thought, wow, I'm pretty good at this. Then I was lucky enough to join Google as the first engineering director, where I led the engineering team, not the business team, right? That built AdWords that now makes, I don't know, over $100 billion a year, an incredible money-making machine. So, but then I had at least 3 successes, right, in my career, joining Sun Microsystems that just went crazy well. My first startup went crazy well. Google went crazy well. So I left to do my second VC-backed startup. And because of my background and past success, I was able to raise $25 million in VC funding from the best VCs around, like Sequoia, and spent 5 years building this amazing product that all of our market research told us, if you build it, we will buy it, right? So all the due diligence was as thorough as it could be. So we built it, and guess what? I don't want to say nobody bought it, but out of 100 people that said that we'll buy it, 3 of them actually bought it. So
what did it do?
Yeah, I experienced my first failure, and so this aura that I think I had, that I was invincible. I was the Italian Steve Jobs, Stefano Giobini. Everything I touched turns to gold. I thought, what the heck happened? How is it possible? And these were the team we built was all great engineers. They were all kind of grabbed by Google when the company shut down. So I thought, how can it be that good people, that execute on an idea that the market research tells you it's a great idea, you go and build it, and they don't show up? And that's what started my journey, because as I'm an engineer, just like if there is a bug, if an electronic piece doesn't work, I try to find out, okay, what broke? And it led me to this journey. So I went back to Google, which gladfully took me back. And Google started to have the same problems, because at first, if you remember, every product that came out of Google was a huge success, right? Google Search, a hit. Google Ads, a hit. Gmail, a hit, right? So once again, you think, wow, everything we touch turns into gold. But then as Google and most companies discover, at some point, your innovation slows down, right? The innovator's dilemma, and you start to experience some of the failures. Like for Google, I would say Google Wave, which was to be the successor to email. So both Google and I at the time, we thought, how do we solve this problem?
Google Radio, don't forget Google Radio.
Well, there is something called the Google graveyard. If you go and look for it online, there is like a graveyard of all the Google projects that failed. And when I was teaching this class at Stanford, I asked students, write on a piece of paper all the Google products that you know. And so they put, search, ads, Gmail, Android. And then, maybe they have 10, 15 ideas. And then I showed them, a laundry list of all the products that fail, which drives the point home, most new ideas will fail in the market. But so Google and I and everybody wanted to understand, how can we fail, right? Because we're so good. How is it possible that moi, Alberto, Google, fail? So I really started to look at it, as an engineering problem, trying to nail down the bug, the primary root cause. And as it turns out, and that's what my book is all about, is that people just executing on an idea that is not the right it. The right it is an idea that if competently executed will succeed. The wrong it is an idea that doesn't matter how well you execute it, market it, sell it, create buzz around it, it will never succeed. So that was the root cause. And then the next step is, how the heck do you find out if an idea is the right it before you invest to build it? And so while at Google, I came up with this technique called pretotyping, because engineers like to build stuff, right? So you give me an idea, start building, fire up the soldering iron or the compiler and start writing the code. And so I would say this is my personal statistics, but it's based on 30 years. If you take a sample of 100 engineers around Silicon Valley, hardware and software, they will have spent at least half their life building products that were failures, right? So if you think about it, that's a gigantic waste of resources. And I thought, we need to fix it. So how do we find if a problem is desirable before you build it? And similar to your book and your concept of seeing around corner, we're trying to peer a little bit into the future before making a commitment, right? Look around the corner before you take the turn. And that's where pretotyping was born. And so I left Google because this worked and I get a lot of demand to teach this. And that's what I've been doing since.
And you teach at Stanford and a bunch of other places.
Yes.
So one of the things I love about there's a lot I love about the book, but one of the phrases I like is, why do you build something and find out if anybody wants to buy it? Why don't you find out what they want to buy and build that? I thought that was great.
That's right. Or what happens is, so I analyze, why does it happen? We fall in love with our ideas, right? And especially, I come up with an idea and then we put blinders on, right? We have so many cognitive biases. And even if we do market research, and I realized what we did with my second startup that did not succeed, was I went and did my market research, but with the bias, and there were already signs that even though people told you, yeah, sure, we will buy it, they were just giving me their opinion. They had nothing to lose. And so one of the concepts that I know you like is my skin in the game, right?
I love that.
To me, market research and market data counts for zero. I mean, absolute zero, unless somebody gives you skin in the game. How do I know it? Because I've been burned it, and everybody I've talked to has been burned by it. So let's say you do a focus group. I have this new idea, you do a focus group, you ask people, would you buy? What do you like about it? Will you not buy? And at the end, it's amazing. Any focus group could be the stupidest product ever. You're going to get, 10, 20% of people that said, yeah, okay, yes, I will drink, a soft drink, flavored like asparagus. You'll always find something like that.
That's a great example.
Yeah. And for products that are plausible, the numbers are much higher, like, 50, 60%. But then when, you put those products on the market, you find out that those numbers are, at best an order of magnitude lower. Why? Because it's so easy to give an opinion. If you tell me, hey, Alberto, I have a great idea, a new book about X, Y, and Z. And I said, yeah, that sounds great, Rita. Yeah, I would be interested. But, and then he said, okay, yeah, we have the book. It's there on the shelf. Would you actually buy? It's very different. So skin in the game means that before you put your own skin in the market, and both entrepreneurs and companies, they put a lot of skin when they develop a product. Make sure that before you do that, you get some skin in the game from the market. How can you do it? Well, I talk about many methods in the book and many types of skin in the game. So one of the simplest one is money, right? So if you have a product that will sell for money, you can validate how interested the market is by seeing if they will give you money before you build it. So I tell them most market research takes the form of asking question, if we build it, will you buy it? And I tell people, you have to flip that 180 degrees. You have to ask, if you buy it, we will build it. And then people say, that's impossible, right? And then I just point to Tesla, which thank goodness for Elon Musk and Tesla, right? Because they're my best example of people doing that. So I said, look, Elon Musk, Tesla, before building the Model S, before the Roadster, they always ask people for a deposit. And think about the first Tesla, right? People putting a deposit for an all-electric car that costs $120,000 built by a guy that never built a car before. If you can get a $5,000 deposit, of which you got hundreds for the first model of the Roadster, what does that mean? It means that they really, really want you. They've given you a lot of skin in the game, so you're justified to take the risk and make the investment in building the car.
Yeah, we talk about demonstrating market commitment, market acceptance. And a lot of sites are like that now. You've got the GoFundMe sites and the crowdsourcing sites that allow you to, invest to build a product, and your reward is you get to be one of the first people to get a hold of it, which I think is just really interesting. So take us through pretotyping. What would you teach people to do in a pretotyping way?
Well, I tell them, if it's a software product, do not write any code. If it's hardware, do not put anything together. Just create something that that you can show the market, pretending that it's the right product, and to see if they give you money. So by the way, the root of the word pretotyping, which most people love, some people hate for no reason, right? But pretotyping means before you prototype, but it also stands for pretendotyping, which is pretend that the product exists and does something to see if people would actually buy it. And there are many techniques. One of my favorite was how Jeff Hawkins, who came up with the original Palm Pilot, took a little block of wood. Well, this is not a block of wood, right? This is just a folder, and put a user interface on it that looked like the Palm Pilot. So you had the right form factor, and then he went around pretending, as in pretotyping, that it worked. So I would ask you, hey, Rita, do you want to meet for pizza next Tuesday? And you say yes, and then he would click. And people thought he was crazy because he was clicking on a block of wood. What he was doing was actually collecting data to validate whether he himself would use the product. Now, and if you wanted to see if the market was interested in the product, you wouldn't have to build the actual thing. He could just have a mock-up, right, with some screens, and through the magic of video, pretend that it worked and take pre-orders or collect emails. So that's another thing. You have an idea, you do a little video to say, we're about to launch this XYZ idea, and you do a video. And if you want to be informed or kept up to date as to when this idea is launched, send us your email. So a valid email address, not hotrita@hotmail.com, not one of those throwaway addresses, right? A valid email address is what I consider to be online the smallest amount of skin in the game, right? Because you don't give your email address to anybody, just like you don't give your phone number to anybody. So the count in the skin caliper that I use, it counts for one skin in the game point. Things that people think count as data, I count as 0 point. So likes on Facebook, views on a video, all of those are just too easy to give. So count email addresses, count 1 point. If people give you the time, say you have a new enterprise software solution, invite somebody that might be interested to, or say, would you like to sit for 1 hour for a demonstration? Now, nobody gives 1 hour of their time unless they're really interested. So that counts as skin in the game. If it's a commercial product, you ask for money, or reputation to count. So there's many forms of skin in the games and many forms of pretotyping. Probably too much to go over today, but hopefully people get the idea of it.
So Bogdan is suggesting that we're really creating partnerships now, that you found something that's needed in the market, and these people are going to be partners in helping you make it happen.
Absolutely.
In the book, one of the examples that you use for your entrepreneurs, and we'll get to the big company issue in a minute, but the example of day-old sushi.
Yeah, second day sushi. So actually, this is Stanford students. So we do this exercise. I said, I believe in this class, the challenge was, how do you eliminate food? How do you reduce food waste, right? So you come up with a challenge, and we ask students, come up with 100 ideas, which is really hard. After the first 20 or 30 ideas, you start to have like crazy ideas, right? But one of the ideas that came out is second day sushi. And the concept there is that, sushi has to be fresh. And if you buy the packaged sushi, it has an expiration date, and there may be, 20 boxes there and they're about to expire and you throw them away. So these students thought, MBA students, which I thought, hey, there's an arbitrary situation. We can buy sushi that's about to expire for 20 cents on the dollars and sell it for 50 cents on the dollars to our college, dorm mates. So some people liked the idea, other people thought it was crazy. So we decided, okay, look, what is your hypothesis? And their hypothesis was, 20% of students who like sushi will buy second day sushi to save, 50%. So we said, okay, can we test it without killing anybody with stale sushi? And we happened to be in the Stanford building where there was a cafe upstairs, Coupa Cafe, that sold packaged sushi. So the way we pretotyped it is we took boxes of this sushi, which was fresh, right? It was not about to expire. And we just put a label called second day sushi, half price off, to see if anybody would buy it. And then what we found out is the following. When we did the verbal market research and we explained, would you buy second day sushi, if it's half the price? It's perfectly safe, it's just not super fresh. So it may not taste great, but it will not kill you. So the response there was actually 30% of people, give or take, said, yes, sure, no, that sounds like a good idea. I like sushi. If I can pay $4 instead of $8, I will do it. When you actually put it in front of them, exactly the product they described, how many people actually bought it? Zero, right? And they say, well, yeah, I said I would buy it, but then I thought about it, I have finals tomorrow, and if I get some kind of stomach trouble by all the sushi, I would not buy. So that was such clear evidence of what, in marketing is called stated preference and revealed preference. Mm-hmm. And we found a way to quantify it with experiments.
That's really great. So you're no longer with Google. You're kind of doing your own thing. You're teaching and starting up, and you started working with big companies now, I understand.
Yeah. So I started pretotyping mostly for entrepreneurs, but remember, I started it at Google because Google wanted to innovate. So one of my first, I have to tell you, these are the two biggest things that I learned from Google, and now I teach to everybody that I know. These two expressions of ways of operating. The first one is data beats opinion, and the second is say it with numbers, right? So the first week I was at Google, still in the early days, right? Everybody was in one building. There was on this big board, somebody wrote data beats opinion. And I was in a meeting with some product managers, and two people started arguing, and somebody said, say it with numbers. Right. So some people said, if we do this, it will be better. If we do this other thing, it would be better. So they said, say it with numbers. So, kind of pretty much poke somebody to go on the whiteboard and said, and I'm making up this example, right? If we make the search button 20% larger, we will get 5% more clicks, whatever the number is. So once you say it with numbers and once you start to collect data, opinions pretty much vaporize. And this was such a different way of operating for most of the companies I've worked at, including the ones I started, where somehow the opinion, especially if you're the top dog in the company, you said, well, I was successful before, and so I've good intuition, so follow me. At Google, they said, no, data beats opinion. If you need to make your case, you make it with data, and with data, you have to say it with numbers. And one of the things I tell people is, remember Google in the early days, the get lucky, do I feel lucky button? was a big deal, right? Do I feel lucky? Here's the thing. Luck has nothing to do with it. When you click on that button, there is the opposite of luck. There is a very, very strict algorithm that determines, using probability and statistics and math and numbers, what is most likely to be the search that you wanted. So luck is for losers. If you look at all of these companies that are successful, they are to the extreme. They use numbers, they use data, they use numbers at a level that the companies that are not successful do not. So to make, going back to Google. So I was at Google and I learned these two key ideas. And Google, as a large company, like all large companies, they have gigantic innovation potential. So innovation potential is a term that I coined in an article I wrote while I was at Google. What is the innovation potential? You take a company, you take all of its employees, each of whom has special skill, resources, passions, loves, technology. You take the intellectual property, you take the financial resources of the company, the market goodwill, you combine those things, you have gigantic innovation potential. So large companies can do a bunch of things, theoretically. In practice, their ability to execute is very limited, right? So the challenge for large companies is, of all the things we could possibly build, and you could build a lot. I mean, think about Google. When I started, was a search company. Now they have self-driving cars, right? You're going from pure software to all this kind of hardware. Apple started as a computer company, then went into the iPod, and then the phones, and then the watches, and then they have the AirPods. Now they're going into Apple Health, and also they're going into cars. So these are all examples of how companies take their skills and they combine, as you said, right? They combine. Hey, by the way, what is an Apple Watch? So I'm wearing an Apple Watch here, right? So an Apple Watch, you combine, a phone, you make it smaller, you combine it, with a watch band, and bang, you have something like an Apple Watch. I call this innovation by combinations, and all innovations are the result of combination. Which, by the way, some people say, hey, Alberto, why do you wear two watches? As you can see, I have on one hand, I have a Rolex. On the other hand, I have an Apple Watch. Because this is the best example of what I call devastating innovation that large companies can do because they can execute. So you take Rolex, well, this hand. So for decades, Rolex was the #1 watch company in the world in terms of revenue. King of the hill. Nobody came even close. Then out of left field, this company that used to build computers and then iPods and then iPhones comes up with an Apple with a watch. In less than 4 years, Apple overtook Rolex as the #1, in revenue in watches. And I just read last week that the Apple Watch by now accounts, sells more than the entire Swiss watch industry combined, right? It's a stunning result. Not only, but it added a few billions of dollars to the Apple revenue. And this is what happens when you take advantage of your innovation potential, because if you can build this, right, an iPhone, you can make it smaller, right, and you can put a wristband on it. So they had all the potentials inside the house, and they took advantage of it, and they created this devastating idea. So this is an example of a successful idea, the right it, really, right? But unfortunately, most ideas are not the right it. In fact, most ideas fail. And the reason why Google was interested in exploring this and using pretotyping is that, is it okay if I use this chart?
Of course, yeah.
Right, so I know it's a fireside chat, so it's informal, but please, you really need help. Okay, so let's pick 1,000 of ideas. So this is the distribution of ideas, right? So do we agree most new ideas are bad, right? So I can combine the iPhone with a watch band and I have an Apple Watch. I can combine the iPhone with a glass of water and maybe I don't have anything there. So most new ideas will fail, right? In fact, 80 to 90%. A few will succeed, and by succeed, I mean there are 1 to 5x, return on innovation here. And very, very few, so this is kind of a long tail, are big results, right? They're 10x, the 100x, the Apple Watch, the AirPods, the Google ads. So here's a challenge for big companies, like Google. They can execute on a lot of ideas, but they want the ideas that succeed. Now, there's some companies that call the apex innovators. So what the apex innovators do is, of course, they try to not invest in those ideas, but they also ignore the small ideas, right? The 1x to 5x. The way I like to put it is, lions do not chase mice, right? A lion has the agility, the strength, to catch and eat a mouse. Is just not worth the calories and the effort, right? So this is what I call, the mice idea. So apex innovator go after the big ideas. Now, so what I've done, because I'm all about saying it with numbers, I said, okay, let us look at the data. So I looked at various data points of how many ideas. And don't worry, I only have 3 of these, but these are very important.
I think it's great. I think it's terrific.
So there, how do I show it here? I mean, river. So I looked at all the data points and to see, okay, what is the probability of payoff greater than a certain amount given an idea? So if I want an idea that has a payoff of X, what is the probability that I have that payoff? So, I fitted the curve, and it looks like something like this. It's like a 1/x curve. So 1/c times X. Don't get scared. Not a lot of math here. So what is the C? So there's 2 distribution. One is conservative, right? The Pareto distribution. So it's 1/5x, which means that, if you want an idea that has a payoff of 10, your probability of finding that idea are 1 in 5 times 10, 1 in 50. I'm more conservative, so I use the super Pareto, which is 1/10x. So what happens is large companies need big ideas to remain apex innovators, right? Incremental innovation is fine. It's just like compound interest. It keeps adding, but you will not break through. You will not add $20 billion to your market cap, to your annual sales, like Apple did with the AirPods, right? So the AirPods by themselves, which is a combination of, hey, we're building an iPhone. We have the little earphones with the dangle with the cord from Apple. We combine that with Bluetooth, and we can have this wireless phone. So it's simple innovation by combination. That by itself is worth $20 billion, which is more than, say, Spotify, right? Which is an entire company that does with music. So that's the power of that. So going back to this, and in the last slide, since I like to say things with numbers, so if you're a large company and you want a certain payoff, you want the 100x idea, the 50x ideas, right? You don't care about the little incremental things because they're not worth your time, right? You're a Google, you're an Amazon, you're any large company, you can execute on these ideas, but why executing the small one? So you find out that if you put this little formula with the scary logarithm there, don't worry about it. You can calculate. The point I'm trying to make is that if you want 50x or 100x ideas, the probability of hitting one of them are, either 0.2% or 0.1%. And what does that mean, right? So if you have a 0.1% of hitting in a 100x ideas, how many ideas do you need to test in order to find that one? And you find out that the number is in the orders of magnitude of hundreds or thousands. And then you say, Alberto, but that's crazy. We cannot possibly test hundreds, thousands of ideas. And it sounds crazy. It is not crazy. That's exactly what companies like Amazon and Google and pretty much all these companies are called apex innovators do exactly that. And the only way that you can test thousands of ideas per year is if you use pretotyping. So you cannot build them from scratch. You need to find out if there is market interest before you go ahead and build it. So pretotyping allows you to test ideas in a matter of hours or days, and for really inexpensively. And this is how the concept of the write it, an idea that if competently executed will succeed in the market, combines with pretotyping, which is test those ideas very quickly. And if you find the right ideas, then you become an apex innovators, which is the goal of large companies.
That brings us to a couple of interesting, I think, current issues, which is a lot of what makes that's pretotyping possible is pretty sophisticated use of technology. Like really looking at where users are going, looking at their behavior, using the algorithms, predicting. And what I'm seeing in a lot of situations is those leading companies that do this well. It's a bit like watching the New York City Marathon, right? I used to go to parties and we'd hang out and watch the marathon go by. And the first few runners are just gorgeous. I mean, you can barely see them sweat, right? And then after 6 hours, the rest of the lumbering pack comes along. The challenge, I think, is that it's almost like it's a positive spiral, right? So if you're good at it, you're going to be that much better at it for the next round, and then that much better at it for the next round. And it really can create some interesting competitive difference.
That's absolutely right. So what happens is every time you go into a different product, right? So if you go from the iPhone to the Apple Watch, what you do, you expand your innovation potential. It's like just going to the gym and working out your muscles. So now you have a company. Let me ask you this question, Rita. Mm-hmm. Is there any kind of product or market or service that you think, say, Apple or Google or Amazon could not do?
Not very much.
Not one, right? You can think, if they wanted to get into vaccines, I bet you they could just either buy it through acquisition and combine. These companies can pretty much do anything. Mm-hmm. And as we were discussing before we started this, kind of my mission, so the world has a ton of problems, right? And unfortunately, what happens is that we're not good at finding out if something is the right idea. So we spend most of this amazing resource, our entrepreneurs, our innovators are spending the majority of their time, the majority of their efforts on ideas that fail in the market. Mm-hmm. So think about the colossal waste that represents. And that is my mission, is to take what is our most valuable and necessary resource for the present and future of humanity and try to avoid them building products that end up in landfill because they are complete failure. So that's my mission. And my approach, which kind of fits my personality, but must be combined with less, let's say, quantitative types. My approach is look at the science, look at the data, try to understand the data and operate it in that way. So I know I can be pretty annoying, right? Because sometimes I have entrepreneurs that come to me that, oh, Alberto, I have this great idea. It's like, Uber for chocolates or whatever it is. And, they make this beautiful narrative and they show me all this data, say, look, in the US, people consume 14 pounds of chocolates per day. So if we get 1% of that market, so they give me the kind of data that I call OPD, other people's data, which has zero applicability to you. So I tell them, okay, first of all, don't wave your hand. Tell me what your idea is using number. And I have this technique I explain in the book called the XYZ hypothesis. So can you take any business plan, any projection, even your elevator pitch, and condense it into the following form? At least X% of Y will do Z, right? So Y is your target market and Z is what you expect them to do. So in this case would be at least 10% of chocolate lovers will sign up for, Uber for chocolate, Uber chocolates. And then they just can click here, and within 5 minutes, they will receive a box of, whatever their favorite chocolate is, right? So once you've taken your idea from this abstract, level, which I call Thoughtland, and articulate it in this very simple formula, at least X% of Y will do Z, it's a hypothesis. And hypotheses are beautiful because they exist for one purpose only. You're not saying this is true. It's not hope, it's hypothesis. Not hype, but hypothesis. And then you can test it. Say, okay, if it's true, the 10% of chocolate lovers will do this, all over the world. Find 100 chocolate lovers, give this offer to them, and see if they actually use the app or service. So what you're doing is you're going from this really abstract idea to something that's concrete and it's testable today. And people say, okay, how can I do it? Well, and usually I do this when I do my workshops. Sometimes I'm at this large company and they go to lunch, and we discuss some ideas. So I say, okay, you go to lunch. I don't eat lunch. I do intermittent fasting, right? So you go to lunch. So while they go to lunch, I say in the conference room, and I put together in 10 minutes a website for their idea that we discussed, right? which, right now it's very easy to do. You go to a website builder, like say, Weebly, which is what I use. And for free, for $10, you buy a domain. So I call it Uber Chocolates. I'm just making this up, right? So I buy uberchocolates.com. And then it's just, if you can put up together a slide in PowerPoint, you can put together one of those websites. So I drag some images from the web of chocolates and, of cars being driven around. So they come back after the 1 hour lunch and said, remember that idea that we talked? Here's the website, right? So, and now, in the next hour or so, I can buy some ads for people that search for chocolates and present it and make a little video of how it works. So literally in a matter of hours, definitely in a day, you can do it. You can go from this concept to an idea, and then you can start to collect data, right? So you say, do you have friends that like chocolate? Send it to your friends, because everybody loves chocolate, right? Let's see how many of them are interested in this app. So they go to the website, which says, okay, sign here if you want to register. And then you collect the email address. And then you find out, boy, we sent it to 2,000 people, because each of us, said 20 people, everybody sent it to 100 friends, and only 3 people signed up. All of a sudden, your hypothesis, kind of comes grinding down to reality, and you've learned all of that in a matter of hours.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. I love that. And I love the way, the new tools are making all this so much easier, and yet people aren't using them. People really aren't.
That's right. There's 2 revolutions, Rita, that are, I think, very important. The first one is the no-code revolution.
Yes.
So pretty much described, right? There's a ton of things. When I started programming, you had to learn a bunch of stuff. Now, I can literally, this idea for the Chocolate Uber app, there's at least a dozen, right, app builders that you can use for free. This is the key. You download it, an hour later, I have our little Uber chocolate with the logo and all of that stuff. And it's a working app. And, if you can use PowerPoint, you can use that. The same is also true in hardware, right? So there's the no-code revolution is in software. In hardware, we have what, I call it the Arduino revolution, because that was the first board. So the Arduino was this like little computer with sensors and everything in a box. The Raspberry is another one that costs $20 or $50. Right? So whereas before you had to have these custom chips to do things. So basically right now you can take, a computer. If you thought the Mac Mini was small, these are, literally, just like this, like the size of this, and they cost $50. On top of that, so let's talk about the hottest thing today, machine learning, right? Everybody talks about machine learning. When I was a student, I studied computer science. You had Lisp. The Lisp compiler cost $5,000 per seat. Okay, and it took you 3 months to do something that could recognize whether something is a square or a circle. Now, so companies like Google and Amazon and Microsoft, et cetera, they spent thousands of engineer years to come up with this machine learning, and it's available for people to experiment and to learn for free. So it's like Google had, for example, it's called TensorFlow. And I forget what the Amazon is. So you can go, and in this module, in a couple of hours, you can have a machine learning thing. So not only do they make the software freely available, of course, to do the experiment, then if you need to scale and have 100,000 users, you pay for it. Also, all the training is free, right? So you can go on YouTube and, other created by the Google and Amazon themselves or somebody else. You have enough instruction that somebody with a bachelor in computer science, not a PhD like you need to use in the old days, in a couple of days can create a machine learning app. And then miracles of miracles, this $20 boards like Arduino ML, right? Sounds with machine learning for $20, $30. You can download the machine learning into this physical device. And then, I put in a little box with a couple of batteries, and maybe this can determine whether I'm sleeping or, or jogging or doing anything. So I like this that you mentioned, because pretotyping is great, but also actually building the right thing has become essentially free, frictionless, which is great for entrepreneurs, but is also a risk for the large companies. Because right now, anybody can come up with the next great machine learning application. So large companies, need also to be aware and take advantage of that. So I talk too much. This is supposed to be a chat. I don't want it to be
no, this is fascinating. Totally fascinating. So a couple of quick questions from the chat. One is, how would you teach younger children about this? Like where in the growing up curriculum would you start to think about these things? Because my experience is younger children do this all the time. That's what play is, right? We're learning and we're figuring out how things relate to each other. And then somehow that gets squeezed out of us as we get older.
Yeah, I only use data that I have, right? As I said, I'm very little guy. So the youngest, I don't know, probably the youngest people I reached were, the youngest Stanford students. So let's say 18 years old. So how do we teach them? The beautiful thing, if they're young, they haven't yet taken all those graduate courses that tell you, write the big business plan and do this and do that, do the market research, et cetera, et cetera. And maybe it's not the way of teaching, but imagine a class where you say, okay, I have an idea, right? So have an idea to reuse, to minimize food waste. Approach number one. Well, go to the business school libraries and do research and come up with the numbers of food waste and try to, write a 10-page paper with data and support your hypothesis, or tell them, hey, come up with an idea like second-day sushi and go and try it in the market. So you find out that, as you said, it's much more natural for children to say, well, let's see if it works. I mean, what, you and I are to some extent academics, and what academics tend to do is they kind of tend to backfit things, right? And the reality is that the things that we've learned and we teach at the academic level were learned through empirical research, right? So you find out how to make something fly, and then you kind of work backward, and come up with the theory. So by nature, human beings are experimenters. So children, I think, I haven't taught anybody that young, but I think they would take to that approach very well. Say, build it and see what happens, rather than tell them to do their research.
That's great. So I want something that personally has always sort of intrigued me is let's go back to Apple, right? And Steve Jobs is famous for having said, at least publicly, that we don't do market research. We give people what they want before they know they want it, and we present them with these irresistibly wonderful products. So how does this notion of pretotyping map onto that position?
Well, so one of the advantages that big companies have, so I'm not going to disclose, any Apple or anybody's secrets, but this is just a known and understandable fact. What some companies say, like Google and Amazon, they just go out to the actual market. But so Amazon created this very recently, this thing where they just do like a Kickstarter. They put a new idea. One of them was a cuckoo clock, an Alexa cuckoo clock, right? So they put the idea and they said, if enough people pre-order it, we will buy it. My Alexa just answered, yes. Okay, Alexa, be quiet.
That's wonderful.
You have to be careful.
That's marvelous. What a great moment.
So some companies like Google and Amazon, they actually go to the market. Other companies tend to be more secretive, but they still do a heck of a lot of testing, right? So sometimes you see a leak from Apple, right? The employee that left one iteration of the latest iPhone by accident in the bar. So they build the products that the people want, because among the innovation potential and resources of a company, there is one that most people ignore. Most of their employees are human beings, right?
Most of them. Not all of them, most of them.
Most of them. So what it means is that you have an internal group where you can test your ideas internally before they go out to the market. So in fact, I'll give you an example. In the early days of Google, Gmail started by one Google engineer who thought, I'm fed up with Microsoft Outlook. We have this great technology. I want to build our own email service where we can search. He started by himself. And then he offered it to 100 Googlers, in the very, very early days. I was one of them. And then what he discovered is, and then he didn't ask them, do you like it? Do you not like it? He just looked at the data. So he had the log, said, I offered it to 100 Googlers, 90% downloaded. And out of those 90%, all of them are still using it today, right? So you could do the research internally, and it's not a stretch to say, look, if 90% of Googlers prefer Gmail to, in that case, Microsoft Outlook or Hotmail, whatever, what is the probability that the world at large would also like, right? So you can do your testing internally. Apple builds product that people will like because they first test in-house extensively that they will like it. Other companies like Google and Amazon, they are the example. They just toss them out to the market. They get the market feedback, or do a combination of those. I hope this answers the question.
Yeah, no, it's great. That's terrific. It just, because I get that question a lot, which is, well, and I think we mythologize these things sometimes, like the waves part, and Steve Jobs appears on a clamshell, and and the rest is history. But I think there's actually a lot more behind the scenes that goes.
That's right. Remember, Steve Jobs also came up with Next, which was a big success, right? His previous company, Next, and also the Apple Newton, which was not a success, right?
Well, what about the Cube? Remember the Cube?
The Cube, yeah, I think that was the next computer, or those things. So, you're right. We mythologize, we cherry pick the example, we ignore the failure and focus on the big successes. But it raises an interesting point, Rita, is that, if you can have countless small failures, as long as the successes are in this category, right? The 10 or 100x, they just cover all of your mistakes. Yep. You can do 1,000 Google glasses, right?
Right.
or Google Wave, and they will, it doesn't matter, because you have ads and search and Android, and Amazon failed with the Fire phone, right? Mm-hmm. One of those rare failure, because sometimes there's two ways that you can approach it. One is you can play attack, or you can play defense, right? So. Mm-hmm. Remember, Google tried to do Google Plus to kind of counteract Facebook, right? So that was more of a defensive move. So you don't think, well, let's test if people would like it. Sometimes, if you're a large company, you have to go and play defense and throw your product out to see if it succeeds. Sometimes, like with Android versus iPhone, it succeeds. Other times, Google Plus versus Facebook does not succeed, or Fire phone versus iPhone and Android do not succeed. Large companies behave by they need to follow certain rules, right? They're like the kings and queen of the jungle. So there are some things that they need to do. As Machiavelli said in The Prince, the morality of the ruler, right, of the prince, cannot be the same morality of the individual. So the approach to innovation of large company has to be different than the approach to innovation of entrepreneurs. But the one thing that they have in common is that if they have the wrong idea, whether you're large or small, you are going to fail. So again, my mission is to help people validate the ideas before they invest them, whether they're two people in the garage, or a $20 billion dollar company.
That's great. So one of the questions that came up, and I'm sure you know Steve Blank, I mean, who doesn't know Steve Blank? And one of the questions that's come up is how pretotyping fits into lean startup and some of my work on discovery driven. I think they're kind of part of the same philosophy, I think.
I absolutely. In fact, I used to run, before COVID, I used to run into Steve Blank. We're brought into a company, they want to have this thing on innovation. And so I go in at 11, and at 10:59, Steve Blank comes out, and we say hello, and we go in. So I will tell you, I've taught pretotyping, in a lean environment. I taught it at the Stanford D school, and the best description of how it all fits together came from my students, who said, "Look, Alberto, pretotyping makes lean leaner, right? It makes design thinking more thoughtful." And it makes sprints, which is another technique of this, makes sprints faster. So because I'm an engineer and I'm a mathematician, what I think pretotyping does is to create a foundation upon which this bigger and, let's say, more complex and richer canvases can be built, right? So instead of starting, business canvases are very useful, right? But they're big and complex. So I tell people, well, yeah, we follow these canvases. So okay, can you go on the board and draw it from memory? And 9 times out of 10, they do, well, I don't know what goes here. So I tell them, okay, whatever the canvas you have, will you ever forget the XYZ hypothesis? At least X% of Y will do Z. It's as simple as possible. So whether you're using lean or design thinking or sprints. What I teach are the fundamentals, just like take algebra 1 before you take calculus. I'm the algebra 1 person, because if you don't get the basics right, everything else pretty much just falls apart.
Yeah, I think so too. So when you go work with a big company, so I've had this experience recently. I'm working with a company that prides itself on being operators, right? So they run big, complex, asset-intensive things. And I go talk to them, and they're brilliant operators. I mean, within decimal points of precision on everything that they're doing, because it's dangerous what they do. And then I talk to them about this kind of thing, pretotyping, planning by checkbooks, and don't worry so much about the rate of failure. Worry more about the cost of failing or the magnitude of failing. You can try a lot of stuff. If it's a penny a piece, who cares, right? And you're absolutely right. You'll be forgiven if something works out of all that. And they look at me as though I'm speaking Greek. Like, okay, I understand you don't want us to do a 10-year spreadsheet. Would it be okay if we did like a 3-year spreadsheet? It's just, so what's been your experience at sort of entering those environments and getting people over that hump of being so, not just, it's not resistance really, as just complete incomprehension?
No, and I've had the same thing. I would say for every 1,000 miles you move away from Silicon Valley, what I teach becomes more and more, it's like, how could you do that, right? So, you pick, I'm not going to name the country or the company, but let's say a large railway company in a European country. No, those are very conservative people. So,
an unnamed, possibly Italian or French European country.
No, a little farther east. And that exactly the same response. We cannot do this. This is unacceptable. So here's how I convince them. Again, people, as you know, it's much easier to follow a story than it is to follow data. So what it is true that data beats opinion in reality, but when you need to convince people, stories beat data. So here's my trick, and I'm sharing it publicly for the first time. And Rita, you cannot do it out of me, but I cannot. Now that you ask me, I cannot resist it. So I tell you my secret. So because I'm an engineer, I cannot move away from data, but I understand the power of the story. So I tell them, all right, you've been following this process. So let's pick 5-10 projects and you've done in the past. Have you experienced any failures in the past? And they say, oh yeah, we've had this and that. And did you do the 5 and 10-year plan for that before? Yes. And show me those plans. I said, well, how well did it track to the plan? Now, I can tell you with just zero exception, right, that the majority of those 10-year plans that can drag out, they did not materialize. Sometimes exactly the opposite happens. So I asked them, all right, so you show me the data. You've been following the system that consistently, more often than not, led to failure. So let me tell you a story of how we could actually do it. And I go from the general to the specific, right? Because in the general, if I show you a chart like this, you say, yeah, this is great, but it's numbers. So most people, they don't mean anything. So I said, okay, what projects do you have now? They say, yeah, we're projects, ABC. Said, okay, what are your projections? What is everything? So here's how would you do it? Let's write the XYZ hypothesis. Would you do some experiment? And so as I go through each step and tell them the story, so we do this, and then we show it to 100 customers, and maybe the 100 customer will respond positively or negatively. And then if they respond positively, we can go to the board and we can make our story, make our case with a combination of data plus a story. So I say, Mr. CEO or Mrs. CEO, we came up with this great idea. We knew that in the past we had some ideas that didn't work. So what we did, we created a hypothesis, went in the market, we tested with 3 groups of customers, and these are the results. So we now have 90% confidence that the product will succeed and it will contribute this much to the bottom line. So I got them from the general to a very specific examples. And then when you compare, hey, this is what you were doing in the past, right? Here's a business plan you showed me with 10-year projection, didn't come even close. The project was killed after 2 years. And this is another example of how you could do it. Now, which one do you think works best. And then they toss the issue of, yeah, but we're in a very regulated industry. But I think we can have that talk another time, because I also have a talking to do for people who use that as an excuse of being over-regulated.
I have a lot of clients in financial services and banking, and they're always whining about being heavily regulated. And I'm like, you should wake up every morning and kiss the ground that you are heavily regulated. That's the only thing that's keeping you from getting your lunch eaten by fintech entrepreneurs.
Well, yeah, you mentioned that. I thought, who? Robin Hood. You know, you go at the taxi and limousine industry, we're heavily regulated. Fine. Comes Uber, who doesn't give a damn about the regulation, right?
Exactly.
Here's another one of my favorite quotes. I like to quote myself a lot. I know it's a personal fault of mine. If there's a market, there is a way, which means if people want something, regulations be damned, right? They will be tossed away. Think, you know, when Google came up with the self-driving cars, I thought, any question that our engineers can build them? Zero, right? There's no question. Any question that, you know, they will be allowed to on the road with all those regulations, that's where all the doubts came in. You know, and it wasn't easy, but eventually those regulations were overcome, right? Uber started in New York, where they violated all the rules, right? They were operating an illegal, unlicensed limo service for all purposes, right? So they violated, and for the longest time, they were not allowed in, you know, in most European countries, you know, not allowed at airports, remember? So what happened to those regulations? Right? If there is a market, there is a way. If people want an innovation, the regulations will change to fit the innovation.
Interesting. That's so great. That is so great. Okay. Ooh, yikes, we're coming up on time. So the book is The Right It. I love it. It's really practical, really helpful. I know you've got a lot of other resources. So perhaps where do people go to learn more and to get smarter about this stuff?
Well, so if you search Alberto Savoia, and the thing I'm most passionate about, you know, the book has all the ideas, but if you type Math of Success, Alberto Savoia, I created a series of videos on YouTube on how to use very, very simple math so you can begin to say it with numbers, because I think, you know, numerical literacy is where I see most people fumble. I believe that there is a need for empathy and, you know, all this convincing and intuition, et cetera, great. But we have a lot of that. We need more people like me who teach, okay, this is great. Can you say it with numbers? As Einstein said, not everything that counts can be counted, which is absolutely true, but many things can be counted and should be counted. So I'm the say it with number guys.
Say it with numbers. Is that your next book?
I don't know. Writing a book is much harder than doing the video. So I don't know. I'm not as prolific an author as you are.
It's all typing, right? It's all typing.
Yes.
Anyway, Alberto Savoia, what a pleasure to have spent an hour with you. And I mean, we could just go on all day. And I am going to follow up with you on some of these ideas about big companies, because I think that's where, you know, one of my dreams is that large organizations would be able to renew themselves, because there's so much capability there. And when they stumble and when they fail, yeah, you know, it wreaks havoc on communities and on people's lives. So that's one of my dreams, is to help, I think, join with you in helping fewer bad ideas dominate the conversation. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Everyone. Bye-bye.